It is a huge honor and a rare outlier. I think I did 170 podcasts and you were 171, 2, and now 3. I'm doing 3 in a row with you because you're just that damn good, Scott. Love you to death. Your biggest fan on Dental Town. We did 2 podcasts with you and they were amazing. And I asked you to come back to 3. And the reason I did is because I want to, the biggest fear in dentistry, like say, when I got out of school is OSHA. And when you talk to the OSHA people, they didn't know why dentists had fear because they were saying, well, about 3 out of 1,000 people die every year in mining. About 2 out of every 1,000 die every year in agriculture and construction. And the OSHA people here were telling me, and the government saying, I just looked up dentistry. It's 0.000 deaths per 1,000 per year. I'm pretty damn sure if an OSHA instructor spent the day doing dental offices, they'd get fired. Because we just had a crane fall over, a combine just ate someone's arms off, and a mine collapse, and really you're in a dental office. So, and then HIPAA came along. And HIPAA's this other mythical bad guy, you know, some unicorn with an AK-47. It's that, you know, dentist fear. But now there's a real fear. There's a legitimate fear. And the legitimate fear is that the sovereign profession of dentistry, we won't be a solo practitioner. We won't be a dentist. We'll all be working for corporate dentistry. Now, I want to say a couple specifics. Most dentists that are afraid of corporate dentistry and say corporate dentistry is bad, they're incorporated themselves. So when they say corporate dentistry, I think they mean dental offices that are in 2 or more states. Is that a fair assessment, Scott?
Yeah, I think when we think of corporate dentistry, we think of these larger companies that may or may not be run and managed by dentists, that may not be funded by dentists, and they're on a fast growth track where they're moving into areas and building a bunch of offices. It's definitely not some Joe Blow dentist from down the street who's building a second location. You know?
Yeah, and also, is it fair to say, I mean, to lump all group practices, it's like when people say, you know, the government's so crazy, they're so inefficient. Well, there's a difference between the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the post office. I mean, you know, you just can't say the government. I mean, you got 3 million people working for 100 different agencies, and some of them are just crushing. I can't stand it when they talk about every mistake that what's the agency that does the big land improvements and land all the big land projects like draining swamps and all. What is that called?
I can't remember.
But I mean, but they'll always talk about their mistakes. Like, dude, they did that in the 60s. You don't think they know more in 2015 than they did in 1970? So you know, when you say the government, that's pretty ignorant. And don't you think it's kind of? Do you think all corporate chains are the same? Do you think some are better than others? And what would you say to an associate who's listening to this, or a senior in high school or a senior in dental school, and they say, I need to get a job, and the 125,000 solo practitioners, they have a dental office that sits there 168 hours in a week. It's only open 32 hours, which is 19% of the week. They're not hiring anybody, and when they close Thursday at 5 to when they open Monday at 8, they don't even know how many incoming calls they had, how many were from patients not of record that might have had a toothache, need a root canal and crown. So these dentists listening, they're not employing the 5,000 graduates. So if you were a graduate and you had student loans and you had a wife and a kid on the way, would you agree that not all multi-state corporate dental chains are the same? Some are much better than others.
Yeah, I think we can say we can have generalities about the model of corporate dentistry and what most corporate dental groups are doing and where the opportunities are that they see. But if you look at one group versus another, there are dramatic differences in how they're run, in the success level they have, and what types of practices they're building, what areas of the country they're at. They are definitely not all created equally, but they all do share some big tendencies, and they're all kind of on the same path as they try to become more successful in this rapid consolidation in dentistry that we're seeing right now.
Can you say any names? Can you be any specifics?
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got some of the biggest in the country, like Heartland, where they have what they call their novo practices, their startup side. And they've also got the affiliation they call, which is their acquisition side. And they're across multiple states, and they have some big strengths in regards to Clinical training, the company itself is very well funded. There's a big growth track for non-dentists in the company because of how fast they're growing. They could build a career. I mean, there's a lot of things that they're doing that are great. And you talk to a dentist, and you also find dentists that say poor things about any group. You compare a Heartland to a group like Pacific, for example. Pacific has a more CAD/CAM approach. They've got more HMO involvement. They might do more startups. They might have some version of dentists maybe owning a piece of the company, depending on how you really define that. It's a different model. And then you got other companies like Aspen that is branded the same, that has their benefits, but they're also got some drawbacks. They were recently sold, and they have compliance issues in most states across the country, I've been told. They're all different. You also have local groups that focus strictly on startups, or local groups, or even national groups that focus strictly on Medicaid. They're all different animals, but they share some commonalities and why they're doing what they're doing and what the heck is going on and how it's going to affect private dentists. That's really what I think a lot of people might want to talk about, is what's going to happen to private dentists.
And what is going to happen to private? You answer your own question.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to look at what we've seen and the trends. First of all, these large groups have massively discounted pricing with all the vendors out there. So when a large dental supplier gives a group preferred pricing, what do you think will happen to the private practitioner's pricing? Right? There's gonna be pressures that as they lower pricing for these greatly expanding groups, they're gonna have to make up that margin elsewhere. The manufacturers are gonna have to, and the suppliers are gonna have to. And that's why I think you ask any dentist, have your supply prices been going down year after year? They'd all say no.
It's just not fair, because while they're getting discounts from the major supply companies, they're negotiating higher revenue from the insurance companies. So we're not even on the same playing field. I mean, if you're getting more money per procedure while paying less for your supplies and lab, I mean, what up with that?
Yeah, so that is true. At a certain level, these groups are getting preferential treatment from insurance companies, whether it be PPO insurance or HMO. Some insurance companies, they only sign with the larger groups. When I sold my practices to a large group 6 or 7 years ago, overnight, one of our insurance plans went up 90% on fees for a crown, overnight. We were in network before the sale. We were in network out after the sale. Overnight, that crown fee went up 90%.
From what to what? From what price to what price?
We were 5-something to 900-something.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that was 6 or 7 years ago. And I was scratching my head thinking, how in the world are they not going to quadruple their money on my practice just from that one thing? My supply prices went down overnight. My lab fees, I mean, all kinds of software costs I had, phones, everything, merchant services, all the costs got cut. But it's more serious than that, though. These insurance companies are giving preferential treatment to the groups, as they should. That's capitalism at work here. But that's hurting. If you could make the argument, that's putting pressure on the private practitioner, because again, what's that insurance company going to do when they've got to pay more money to a group? They're going to, I think you ask any private dentist, have your reimbursement rates been going up year after year? And they'll also say, no way, they've been going down. I mean, just ask anyone in Washington State about Delta, and they'll say, yeah, my reimbursement rates are going down. And I think what dentists don't understand is some of these insurance companies own pieces of these large corporate groups.
Really?
Yeah, we've got dental insurance companies that are invested into the funds that are buying and running these large corporate groups.
Can you name any names?
No, I can't. I have had to sign non-disclosure agreements. So I've been hired by private equity groups in the past to help them analyze a potential purchase of a large group. And in having that relationship with private equity groups, being brought on as a consultant to analyze these large corporate chains, I've gotten to see and learn a lot of things that I would have never seen or learned as a dentist. Of course, I can't name any names because in that relationship, I signed a bunch of non-disclosures that I can't talk about who they are. But I will tell you.
Nobody in my podcast will tell anyone. It'll just be the Howard Speaks secret.
Yeah, I will tell you for a fact, dental insurance companies have invested in funds that are owning dental practices.
So then what successes are you have in negotiating an individual dentist insurance fee reimbursement? I mean,
well, the negotiation path that an individual dentist would take is different than that of a corporate group. So it's actually easier to negotiate increases in reimbursement rates as a solo dentist because you're going to the solo dentist section of insurance negotiation. When you go to the group section, you're competing against the largest groups across the country. So you have 5 or 6 locations. It's really hard to get huge increases in your reimbursement rates because you're competing against guys with 500 or 600 locations. So there's kind of this big step up that happens from going from solo in a small group to a big group. And most of those increases are only going to be had by the big groups.
but Scott, what I don't understand from a business point of mind, like, okay, insurance companies for years would complain to me that they don't have providers in certain areas and they got too many providers in other areas. Like when dentists would say to me in '87, they go, well, how would you do demographics? You know, how to find a great location. And I say, well, just go to Delta Dental of your state or Blue Cross and Blue Shield of your state and say, where are all your complaints coming from where you don't have providers? I mean, the insurance companies will tell you. And that's what Rick Workman was doing clear back in '87. He was calling, I believe it was Connecticut General, whatever, and they're saying, we don't have anybody in this town. He'd be there tomorrow. And they would give preferential treatment. But if, like, take my office, for example, since I want to make it all about me and get all my personal gains from this interview. Like, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Why would, if I signed up with you as a client and you called up the insurance companies, why would they want to give me money? I mean, I'm in Phoenix. The Valley has 3,800 dentists. I mean, I get it if I was calling from Eloy, Arizona, Florence, Arizona, or some place where they need providers. But what's in it for them? Why do they want to give Howard more money in Phoenix, Arizona in 85044? I just don't get that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you and I don't know what type of growth track those insurance companies are trying to get on and how all those middle managers are compensated and what type of metrics they have to hit. So, you know, those middle managers of these insurance companies, they don't want to lose providers over time, especially in areas where they don't have enough providers. It might even be in some place like Phoenix or like Dallas, Texas. They still might not have enough providers based on the demand they're getting from employers signing them up. We don't know what their track is, and in some areas of the country with certain insurance companies, we're unable to get higher rates, and in other areas of the country with that same insurance company, we can get higher rates. At the end of the day, though, we have to remember we're just talking to a rep, and the rep has a lot of power on what negotiations are done. That rep is a different rep than the one dealing with the large groups. Okay? The large groups, you know, imagine you're an insurance company. You want to be able to have a large base of providers in any given market. And if someone like Pacific comes to you and say, hey, can you give us preferential treatment on fees? You would look at Pacific and say, wow, Pacific will take our PPO and our HMO, and they're greatly expanding in an area we want to be in, so let's go ahead and give them preferential treatment. Let's have them have all the HMO patients, all the cap checks assigned to them on day one they open. Let's have them have higher reimbursement rates so that we can now sit back and allow them to expand our own footprint in that one general area. That's a lot different conversation than you and Phoenix saying, hey, can you give me a higher crown fee? You know, so at some point, the large groups are able to negotiate much better because it helps those insurance companies grow. But it's a catch-22. Those insurance companies are having to pay more, which I believe is one reason why they're starting to kind of hedge the bet a bit. They're starting to play both sides and own a piece of the corporate group as well through private equity investments.
And when dentists are talking about fees, in my walnut brain, it seems like they're always focused on their crown fee. maybe their root canal fee. But back to statistics, I mean, what fees are the 80-20 rule? Like, what fees are the 80%? I mean, is there just as much gravy in looking at your cleaning, exam, and x-ray fee, or does it really come down to a crown and a molar root canal fee?
Yeah, you basically run the analytics. You see how often every procedure is done in the practice, and then you negotiate for the most often done procedures to raise the reimbursement rates for those. And you could have a lot more money made by adding $20 per pro fee than you could adding $50 on a crown. So it's a scientific process. It's measured. It's not just hoping you get a higher crown fee.
All right. So then what other surviving against corporate dentistry? So then go talk supplies.
Yeah, well, on the supply side, again, they've got all these they've got all these negotiated discounts with manufacturers and with supply companies that we dentists get locked out of. We know, so these corporate groups, typically they don't have local supply reps. The pricing that they get is so low that most of those suppliers do not assign reps to those accounts. We dentists, if we've got a local rep, chances are we're nowhere near the low cost that a corporate group would get.
I don't even think the dentists understand what you just said, because I see this with Danaher, the largest dental holding corporation, publicly traded stock in the world. First they bought Implants Direct, and Implants Direct can have a much lower cost structure by not having reps. And they sell online, so they could massively compete on price. But Danaher also owns Noble Biocare. And it's funny how the number one complaint I hear on Implant Directs is how hard it is to get a hold of their local rep. I'm like, so basically you want your handheld like Noble Biocare, but you're going to buy through Implants Direct. Well, the only secret to lower price is lower cost. And you want to rep? I mean, you're supposed to be a doctor. You're supposed to have 8 years of college. Why are you putting pressures on Implant Directs to have all these local reps when that's the only secret for them to sell you a lower price is to not have all this labor? I mean, labor is 53% of the cost of the S&P 500. So yeah, if you're going to get lower prices, you wouldn't have a local supply rep. So what is the value of having that rep walk into your office every week? And then why is corporate America not having that person walk in the office every week? What explain the logistics of that, the value added to that. I mean, because a lot of dentists might listen and say, yeah, I want lower sundries costs, but no, I want Valerie to come in my house. She brings me donuts every Tuesday morning, and we chat about our kids and grandkids. And so what's the secret to lower sundries?
Yeah, well, the reason why the groups don't need supply reps generally is because they already have run the analytics and analyzed their cost structure and their processes where they know whether or not they want to buy something, if they should, if it's a good investment. They're large enough, they don't need help understanding anything. They don't need to see new products come on board at a local level. They can do it at the corporate level. And they're concerned primarily about controlling costs and having inventory arrive as predicted so that the practices get what they need. A local dentist is going to get more value out of a rep. They might get practice management experience or advice. They might get new products being shown to them. They might have some grassroots campaign and trying to find another associate or a buyer for their practice. All these things might be viewed as valuable, but my opinion at the end of the day is a lot of dentists do nothing with that value. At the end of the day, they have this person that's trying to help them, maybe, and they're not taking advantage of any of that, and they're just spending more on prices. I don't really want this to be, though, about, should you have a local rep or not. As a solo dentist, you will have a local rep. The larger groups, one reason why they have lower pricing is because they don't have a local rep, and they don't really have the need for them typically in their model.
Scott, Heartland uses Dentrix, don't they?
As far as I saw when I was bought by Heartland, they were all on Dentrix, yeah.
Yeah, and doesn't Dentrix have an upper layer? I mean, isn't there just Dentrix regular, but in their Dentrix, is it called Enterprise or Dentrix for multiple locations?
They do have an enterprise version of their software, which is built for groups across multiple locations.
And is that better? I mean, can an individual dentist get that? Do you recommend if a dentist wanted better data to upgrade from Dentrix to Solo to Dentrix Enterprise?
Going to Enterprise, the reason why we go to enterprise if we're a corporate group using Dentrix is so that we can much easier manage patients between locations. We can pull data and statistics based on regions and groups. Whereas if we had regular Dentrix, we'd have to log in and pull all that data out of every single server, every single location. I don't think that general dentists need an enterprise level software like that these days. There's a lot of cloud-based systems. You can even connect to non-cloud-based systems. But the corporate groups, I mean, they definitely want to be able to have that data. And that's why they have Dentrix Enterprise.
And what was that cloud system you said you like? You like Dental Intel?
Dental Intel is a metrics tracking platform. So it basically...
Who's that and where are they out of?
They're out of Utah, I believe.
Right.
And that is a program that overlays on top of like a Dentrix or an EagleSoft or an Open Dental. So they dive into the software, they pull out all the data, and then they present it to us in a very smart way, red flagging things that are going wrong. All the corporate groups have some version of that because that's one way they manage their locations is they have smart analytics that pull out the fires that need to be resolved. But, you know, what I don't think dentists are understanding is what's going to really be happening to us as the corporate groups grow, as our prices go up, as our reimbursement rates go down. It's really going to affect our margins. It's really going to affect what the heck happens when we try to sell our practice. It's already affecting our financing. Things are starting to go down this path. I mean, it's a tsunami coming, and we all kind of know it's coming, but I don't think we really understand what it's like to get hit by a tsunami. That's what I'm really concerned about. I think we're just living in la-la land as private practitioners, just worried about, you know, hey, am I going to finish and have a lunch today or not? You know, we're not really thinking about what is really going on around us.
Do you know the Swami, Mark?
No.
Yeah, he's a periodontist. Mark, the Swami. Yeah, he's been saying this for years. He's been saying for years that dentists are like, it reminds him like they're laying out on the beach, bathing, drinking a Corona with a lime. They don't realize there's a hurricane packing 100-mile-an-hour winds 50 miles out to sea. He's been saying that for a long time.
Yeah. Well, you know, you think about it, and it's amazing. It's the golden age right now of corporate groups being built and sold. It's amazing what they're selling for. You know, these corporate groups are buying dental practices at pennies on the dollar compared to what they're able to sell themselves for. If you think about the value of a dental practice today, most dentists think that the value of a dental practice is based on a percentage of annual collections, for example, 65% of collections, whatever it is. That's not how they're truly valued in the business world. They're valued based on a multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Basically, a multiplier against how much cash flow the office might throw off. So if there's $100,000 cash thrown off by the office after the dentist pays themselves a normal salary, then there's $100,000 of EBITDA, and maybe a practice is worth a multiple of that. So today we're seeing practices sell for anywhere from 2.5 to 5 times EBITDA. So I'll do the math here. I apologize for if dentists are listening to this while they're driving. They can't write it down, but I'll just do some math here. Pretty easy math.
Well, it's okay because my viewers, I always get a transcript of all the podcasts, and then when you go to Dental Town, there's always a transcript. So my viewers don't have to take notes. And there is an issue where some people, the most common deal is the videos get posted before the transcripts get back, just for obvious reasons. And but they eventually all get put up. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks or whatever. But and also, Scott, if you email me any notes you wanted to add here, or any, I know you got 700 pages for them, but anything you want to add, we'll put those attachments on there too.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's look at $1 million practice. $1 million of collections per year. That practice might have a 15% EBITDA or 15% cash flow, 15% margin. So in other words, they're cash flowing $150,000 a year. Okay. If that practice were to sell today, it'd sell for anywhere from 2.5 to 5 times that number. So let's just say 4 times that number. That means it's worth $600,000. All right. Well, if you look at what the large dental groups sell for, It's absolutely amazing. In the last 3 years, the largest dental groups have sold for 12 times EBITDA, 13, another one 13. Two of them this year sold for 14. And 2 weeks ago, one of them sold for 17 times EBITDA. In other words, that same practice that was worth $600,000, some group sold for 17 EBITDA. That practice would have been worth $1.7 million under that group. No, excuse me, I did the math wrong. It's 17 times 150,000. That practice would have been worth $2.55 million. It's worth 600,000 or 700,000 if we own it, but if corporate owns it and then they sell to a private equity group, it's worth $2.55 million. So you look at the numbers, you got a corporate group coming in, they can overnight lower all the costs, they can overnight raise the reimbursement rates, they can put in call centers and management centers and training, and they can pump the market full of marketing dollars, they can build new facilities, and they're buying practices for 600, 700,000, and they're turning around and selling them for $2 million.
And this is all you've ever seen on Wall Street our entire lives. I mean, if my stock is trading at 20 times earnings, and I buy your company for 10 times earnings, the instant I bought your company, I just doubled my money. I mean, I think Henry Schein has, under the genius leadership of Stan Bergman, has acquired 36 companies in his tenure. And I mean, it's just the Wall Street formula. I mean, but I want to go back a little bit, because the one thing doctors never understand is they always think profit is what they take home. If their overhead, the ADA says the average overhead is 64%. So let's say 2/3. So then they say I have 2/3 overhead, so it's 1/3 profit. It's not profit, because it's only profit. You have to pay yourself your replacement cost. So if I pay all my associates 30% of production and they pay half their lab bill, and then what you have left over is 15%, the 15% is profit. But doctor, what you take home is not profit. You have to pay yourself competitive wages for your area. So they always sit there and say, well, my office did $1 million, I took home $350,000, so it's $350,000 profit. That's not how EBITDA is figured. Can you just be a little more? Do you agree with that, or can you go into that? I mean, don't you think dentists mix their labor costs with their profit dollars? They think they're the same.
Yeah, exactly. So if I were to buy your practice and replaced you with an associate, and were to change nothing else, and assuming that associate did the same numbers you did, how much money would I have left over? That's EBITDA. Okay, so, we got to pay the dentist as a dentist. Any buyer that's going to look at the practice, especially as a group buyer or a private equity group, they're going to look at it and say, okay, when we take this practice on and pay dentists as associates, how much money is left over? And that really is what we're talking about for EBITDA. Okay. Dentists that think of their practice as 35% take home, or my practice is worth 65% of collections, they're just talking about their job. They don't have a business, they have a job. That's how they're looking at it. When you have a business, when you have multiple locations, especially if you're selling to a group or trying to get a private equity group involved and you're playing this larger game of Monopoly, all of a sudden it's all about EBITDA. It's about your margin after you pay the dentist. But what's going to happen? Imagine, Howard, imagine you're in Phoenix, your practice. And Heartland's down the street, half a mile away. You got Pacific across the street. You got 3 or 4 other corporate groups, all within a mile radius. And you've got this booming practice that all of a sudden quits booming so much because they're outspending you on market. They're commoditizing dentistry, making it about price. And your margins are getting hit because your supply costs are going up. Your reimbursement rates are going down. And now you want to retire. And you're surrounded by the corporate groups. They're not going to buy you. They have an office right next door to you. And your margin's been hit. Your EBITDA's gone down. And by that time, the cost of capital is going up. So now, who do you sell to? You got much less buyers to choose from. These buyers have higher capital costs, and your profit margin's lower. What's going to happen to the value of your practice? It's going to go way down. And we're already seeing that. We had one of our dentists that we answer phones for get offered 2.5 times EBITDA for one of the corporate groups. 2.5 times EBITDA. It was an insult. He was insulted. But it's because the corporate group is right by him. He's got, he can't find a private dentist to buy his big practice. And so he's trying to figure out what the heck to do. This is happening everywhere.
So explain that, because he has an illiquid asset. And, they teach in MBA school, never let your money get too far from cash. So a lot of dentists say, well, I have $1 million practice. Well, you have $1 million practice if you can sell it for $1 million, but if you can't sell it for $1 million, it's illiquid. Like if you own stocks or bonds, you can turn that from paper to cash in a millisecond. Mm-hmm. But when you own land or a building or a dental practice, and dental practices in rural areas are even more illiquid, because not only do you got to find a seller, you got to find someone who wants to live in Eloy, Arizona.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. So, this dentist can only get whatever the buyer he can find will pay for it. And those buyers are going to be paying less and less money for practices as the profit margin shrinks over time. And there's going to be less buyers as corporate dentistry grows. And it's not just the big city that has this. I mean, you look at a big city like Dallas, Fort Worth area, and you see corporate practices everywhere. But they're in tertiary markets. I mean, they're in Lubbock, Texas. A group of 10 or 12 offices that's corporate affiliated is already in Lubbock, Texas. This is going to be happening in most parts of the country. And whenever the buyers do have to get a loan and interest rates go up, they're not going to be able to afford to pay as much. And over time, the lack of profit, the increased capital, the increased competition, and the less buyers is all going to push the price of practices down. That's the trend. We're already seeing it today. We have to understand that. So, we either have to sell while we got the window of opportunity. The golden age of selling a practice is actually like right now. Or we have to be able to join into an alliance of some sort that will give us all the benefits of corporate dentistry, so that we can build an ark and survive the tsunami and still do okay financially. If we just sit on the sideline and watch this happen, we will watch our profits shrink little by little, and when it comes time to sell, we might not get the money we wanted. Just like what happened to physicians. I know physicians that just shut their practice. They didn't sell it. There's no buyer. They just shut it, and they go work part-time at a hospital. There was no one to buy their practice.
Physicians can't sell their practice. I mean, in 2015 in Arizona, you can't sell your practice. Yeah. Because any physician can open up, align themselves with the hospital, and get more charts than that. There's no value in it. You'll see physicians having billboards and radios and worrying about Yelp reviews because of any physician open, just from Medicaid at the low-cost state level and Medicare at the federal level. The day you open, you can already be booked out 90 days in advance.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can sell your facility maybe, and but not patient flow.
And you look at the corporate groups; they're going to keep growing because they have a war chest of money. We built a practice we helped build a practice in Mansfield, Texas. A corporate group built right next to us. They built a startup practice, 12 ops, granite, standalone building. Staffed it with 2 dentists on day one, and are spending a fortune on marketing, and I guarantee they are losing a ton of money. But they look at that location and say, we need to build something big, we need to own the area, and we can sustain losses for months and years to invest in that location because they have a war chest of money. We could never do that as a private dentist. I can't go lose money for 2 months and build a $1.3 million monstrosity and hope at some point it breaks even before I run out of money. Can't do that. And in the corporate chains, they got the money to expand. They can easily reduce prices. They can easily raise fees. They can easily fix all the broken things that we private dentists don't do well. And they got a ton of new grads wanting to join. These new grads have a ton of debt. I had dental students in an externship here at my company for 2 weeks during the summer. And on day one, I said, what's your plan when you graduate? They all said that they're joining a corporate group. And I said, well, why? They said, well, because we need a guaranteed salary and it seems like the right thing to do. We'll work there a couple years and learn some stuff, and then we want to go out on our own. Well, going out on their own, that's the part that doesn't end up happening so often. These corporate groups are getting dental students left and right, so they have the dentists, they have the money, they have the infrastructure, they have the systems to keep on expanding. And they're being funded by private equity that takes out a lot of debt and puts a little bit of money in and then buys these corporate groups and sells them at 14 times EBITDA. It's just, it's a darling of Wall Street right now is getting into dentistry, this very fragmented mom and pop industry.
Okay, my homies are dentists, so you're using a lot of terms I don't understand. What's private equity? How is that different than venture capitalist?
Private equity is you might have a group of people that raise money, and they raise that money by getting investors, and they raise that money by getting debt. And they put all this money in a big pot, and that's their fund. And then with that money, they're going to go buy equity in private companies. And they buy into a private company, and the goal is to sell and make a return. They want to flip it. So it's like flipping a house. They're going to flip a company. And when they buy this company, they typically pump the company full of growth and growth money, growth capital. Or they're buying a distressed company and trying to fix it before they sell it. And so these private equity groups are diving into dentistry because dentistry they feel is recession resistant. They feel that it's very fragmented and it's easy to kind of put a bunch of mom and pops together and operate better and operate cheaper and operate faster. And so they're moving in a big way. I mean, just look at Heartland's growth curve. I don't know how many years it took them to get to 300 locations, but it was a whole lot of years. They went from 300 to 700 in no time once they were invested into by private equity. And Heartland, as most people know, was bought by a private equity group, or actually the Canadian Teachers Pension Fund, a few years back for around $1.2 or $1.3 billion. And they're pumping Heartland full of money, and they're growing tremendously. This is happening whether we want it to or not. So we dentists, we got to know it's going on, and we have to align ourselves properly so that we can sustain our profit margin. And at some point, we have to understand that if we don't sell our practices during the golden age of selling, at some point we have to plan for the fact that our practices are going to be worth less money than we maybe thought they would be worth today.
Okay, well, answer this to the older guys. Because once again, I have to keep reminding you, I am 17. I am your father. I'm 17 years older than you. So a lot of us older guys that I hang out with, 50 to 75, okay, this is the second time we've seen this. When we came out of school, Lazarus took Orthodontic Centers of America all the way to the New York Stock Exchange, worth $1 billion, and it all fell apart. When I got out of school, there was a dozen on NASDAQ. Is this just a cycle? Because it seems like when in the 80s, this all happened, and then pretty much all went bust, and then there was a decade, and now they're all back. Is this just a business cycle, or do you think this is here to stay? What's different about this time versus last time? Because really, older guys have a bias say, dude, I've seen this before. They can't manage dental offices. They say a dentist can't even manage a dental office. They can't manage it. Is it different this time, or is it just another cycle?
It's completely different. First of all, the financial health of these companies is outstanding for the most part. They're very financially healthy, and they're growing in a very predictable pace. They are repeating their successes over and over and over again. So they are much healthier companies. On top of that, back then, dentists had a lower barrier to entry into owning their own practice, and it was easier to get goodwill and case acceptance and do okay as a dentist. Today, there's a tremendous amount of debt load. There's more part-time dentists joining the industry compared to back then. There's all of these forces that are pushing dentists toward the corporate model. It's also much more complicated to run a practice. There's more insurance issues to deal with. There's more compliance issues you got to deal with. More liability. So everything is pointing to the corporate model of dentistry. And this is not a fad or a phase. This is here to stay.
Okay, and so then go through. I've only got you for 15 minutes, and then go through. So what you're doing is you're trying to build. You're almost like a cloud source. You're kind of like an intermediary. So you're saying you're a solo practicing dentist. You're competing with a corporate chain that has 1,000 offices, and you're kind of going to be that middle cloud layer to make them more competitive. So what can you help them compete against corporate dentistry, and what can't you help them compete against corporate dentistry?
Yeah, so you're talking about my company specifically?
Yeah, you.
Yeah. Well,
The man, Scott Leune.
you can view my company. So my company is Breakaway Practice. You can view our company as two layers. One layer gives private dentists the same benefits that corporate dentistry gets, meaning all the things that lower costs, all the things that raise revenue or raise collections, and all that added support we need, compliance and auditing and HR and hiring and all those types of things. We do 40 or 50 of those items at a very large scale across the country, and we do them for private dentists. In other words, dentists join in, tap into our infrastructure that is as big or bigger than most large corporate groups, and I would argue better than most large corporate groups, and they get the same buying power, they get the same marketing knowledge, they get the same operational expertise that these large corporate groups have, the same software and technology. We have all of that. We're basically the infrastructure of a large corporate group built specifically and custom just for private dentists.
And you're a metrics guy. What are metrics? I mean, net income. Like dentists always worry about their labor, and then I was like, dude, how much did you make last year? And they're like, $250. I'm like, and you're complaining? I mean, so it's net income. Do you have metrics? I mean, how many basis points or percentage net income do your clients get when they use you? I mean, at the end of the day, what happens to their net income as a percent of revenue?
We can lower their costs to free up 5 additional points. So if they had a 15% EBITDA, strictly from lowering costs, we can raise them to a 20% EBITDA right off the bat.
So your efficiencies are about 5%.
No, strictly on saving money. But then we've got all the other stuff that has to do with cleaning up everything that's broken in a practice, getting more patients to call, getting more appointments scheduled, getting more dentistry accepted. That's about raising revenue. That varies from practice to practice depending on how much of the stuff they're wanting us to help them with. But this is all just one part of my company. So it's this kind of infrastructure that is as good or better, as big or bigger as most corporate chains that private dentists tap into. That's one part. Dentist still owns their own practice. They still control everything they do. They can have as much or as little of that as they want. We also have the other part that people don't know about it. It's not on our website, but we do talk about it at our events. What we're doing is we're not just joining practices together to negotiate better and to operate better. We have this whole other part where we are joining practices to build a DSO, a corporate group. But the corporate group is owned and controlled by the dentists, and the dentists keep all of their own profits. And we build this corporate group with the eventual goal of selling it, but not selling it for 2.5 to 5 times EBITDA like a practice is worth today, to sell it at the multiples that the large groups are getting. In other words, we've created this path or this vehicle that dentists who do want to sell their practice in the next 5 to 7 years can join in, put their practice in the pool. They still get to manage their practice. They still get to keep all the profits from their practice. And this group grows and grows and grows and then sells directly to private equity for a much higher multiple than they would normally get. And they get to keep that.
And are you going to do it the model like my buddy Steve Thorne, who calls every practice Pacific Dental? Or are you going to do it more like Rick Workman, my buddy of Heartland, where every time he acquires an office, it's just he keeps the name of the original office? I mean, they're not branding Heartland anywhere, are they?
Not to my knowledge.
So which model are you going to do? Some dentist throws his office into this group. Was it going to be called a different name or?
It'll still be called John Smith DDS. It'll still be the same name. It's the name that built the goodwill in the community, that built his reputation, that patients are used to seeing. That's the name it'll be called.
And how many people have thrown their office in this ring?
Yeah, we've got about 180 practices that are going to be joining us whenever we have determined that they're fully compatible. So right now we're going through the compatibility process. We're running all kinds of analytics on their practice and looking at how they operate, and we're trying to fix the things that are broken so that they can operate in this pool as one corporate group and be valuable to a private equity group that wants to buy them.
Are you doing it? I think one of the smartest women businessmen I ever knew was a lady in Utah. Just absolutely copied the Southwest Airlines business model. She only used Boeing 737. She did everything the same. And when she built up her deal, she knew someday Herb Kelleher was going to want to be out in Utah. And when he got to that part, he said, "Oh my God, you're perfect." And she said, "I knew it all along. I designed this marriage before you do." Do you already have a buyer that you're trying to make it? This is a no-brainer.
I've already been approached by multiple private equity groups to buy, and we haven't even gotten the legalities together to even be in a position to sell. We don't intend to sell for at least 5 years. They're drooling at this kind of opportunity because we are reverse engineering the sale. We are saying, what do buyers value during this golden age of selling? And let's put that together, but let's give all the money and power to the private dentist. But only the dentist that wants to sell. You know, and I guess I might be rubbing some dentists the wrong way, to be honest with you, because I'm always the champion for private practices. I want the private practitioner to succeed and thrive. But the reality is that this bubble is going to pop. Practice groups will not be sold at 17 times EBITDA forever. It's not going to happen. So we have a bubble where private equity groups are diving into dentistry very quickly, and it's going to pop. To me, the tsunami's coming. I'm trying to build an arc so that as many private dentists as possible can benefit from it. But by no means am I feeling like we're selling out to corporate dentistry. I'm trying to build a way for a private dentist to be able to sell their practice at a very high multiple to a buyer who would value this group. That's what we're building for those dentists that want to be on that side, the dentists that want to sell over the next 5 to 7 years. For the dentists that don't want to sell over the next 5 to 7 years, they can still join in our alliance and have lower pricing and have higher collections and have all the support that these corporate groups generally just save for themselves.
Now the dentists that are throwing their office into this ring for the 5 to 7 year plan, are you going to put them all on the same management information software?
2 years before the sale, we will have to standardize some things in the practice. A buyer's going to want to see common financial reporting, as an example. Other things we won't have to standardize. So it will depend on the market and the buyer and logistically how well we're able to glue the practices together and run them as one large organization. There's programs out there right now, like you mentioned, Dental Intel. That's a prime example where if we want the analytics of a practice, we don't have to all have them on Dentrix because we have this overlay program that can talk to Dentrix and Open Dental and EagleSoft.
And they're in Utah. Who's the owners of that?
Dental Intel, they're out of Utah. That's the company called Dental Intel.
But do you know the CEO's name or? Yeah,
there's a group of owners, and they're all awesome guys. They're really talented guys that have been in the software industry. They came into dentistry, and they partnered with a bunch of really smart people in dentistry, all the top consultants you might list. They consulted with them to build their program. It's an excellent program. Okay.
Right on.
All right, so, we dentists, we're going to either build an arc and sell at a high multiple while we can, or we need to join together and be as efficient and productive and profitable as we can through a common infrastructure and alliance. You know, all of us private dentists have always talked about it, like even on Dentaltown. Shouldn't we form an alliance on Dentaltown? They've always said that. Well, no one was doing it, so we just finally went and did it. It took us a couple $1 million and 5 years to do it, but we now have it. So that my practices and other private practices can join together and have some of those benefits. But really, the point of this podcast, I think, is to make sure all of us dentists truly understand what really is happening. I mean, we didn't even talk about the Affordable Care Act. That's having pricing pressures on insurance plans as well. I mean, there's just a lot going on in the group world, in the insurance world, that's going to be affecting us dentists. It's important that we stay informed, that we know what's happening so we can prepare for it. We can expect it.
And California is 10% of America, and Canada's the same size. Are these group practices just include the neighbors to our north? Is Heartland and any of those guys? Is anybody crossing into two countries now? Has anybody crossed the border into Canada?
There's one larger corporate group that is in Canada. There's a bunch of private equity groups that are building Canadian groups. That already exists. In our alliance, we also have Canadian practices. Canada's doing very well when you look at it from a dentist success perspective. But the groups are moving into Canada. They're moving into Australia, to New Zealand, to the UK, into Asia. This is a proliferation that's kind of started here in the U.S., but it is being repeated in multiple countries right now.
And then when you sell this, are you moving back to Amsterdam?
When it sells, it's highly likely that I will have to be part of the management team and continuing to operate and run the organization. So I'm building an arc that I don't get to get off of. The dentists get to get off of it, and my own practices that I might own get to get off of it, but I myself, in order to bring the highest value for our organization, for the dentists that are in the arc, I myself and any sort of significant leadership position would likely have to stay for a good little while if the buyers are going to want to pay a lot of money for these dental practices.
And my belief is guys like us could never retire anyway. I mean, they found Sam Walton dead at his desk. They found France's President Mitterrand dead at his desk. I could have retired several times, and my God, I actually work more hours a week now at 53 than I did at 43 because – so now when I don't have to work ever again, I'm working more hours than when I had to work. When I had to pay off student loans, I'm working more hours now than when I don't have any student loans. So I think I think guys like us just love it. We just love it. We love the game. I mean, if you told me I could never pull 4 wisdom teeth again, I'd probably get verklempt and cry and have to blow my nose. I mean, I couldn't imagine not having to do that. Or if you told me I'd never lecture again. Or you told me, yeah, I mean, so I think guys like us will absolutely probably have put in a 12-hour day on our last day. They'll find Scott Leune dead at his desk.
But I want you to read a thread, Howard, on Dental Town, this little website called Dental Town. I want you to read a thread. I posted a thread on don't retire, semi-retire twice. And I talked exactly how even us general dentists, instead of feeling like we got to work until we're dying, and then as soon as we can't do anything at an older age, we then stop working and try to enjoy ourselves, is completely backwards. So there's this thread that talks about when we need to work hard and save, and when we need to work a little bit less and spend, and then go back to working hard in our prime, and then go back to working part-time and spending. Never do we quit working. We just start getting more meaningful in what we do. But this whole model of work the most when your kids are little so you don't see them, work the least when you have the least amount of health to enjoy your life, just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think you should go read that thread. I think it's a cool thread.
Yeah, and by the way, buddy, I believe you're the most subscribed to. I don't know if a lot of our podcast people realize, but on Dental Town, whenever you see a post or you see someone you like their content, you can subscribe to that thread. I'm pretty sure you're the most subscribed to dentist on Dental Town.
Well, it's the first popularity contest I think I've won, so thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, and people are a big fan of your post, and you're also the only person I ever brought back for a second time and or a third time. But speaking of time, we are out of time, but I just want to say that I want to come to your course. Or will you ever put one on in Phoenix? Or no, it'd probably be better to see it in San Antonio, right?
Yeah, you got to come to San Antonio so you can see 140 people manage offices across the country. It's awesome. We have
you got to stay. I forgot the name of it, but what is the big hotel that's on the Riverwalk where you walk down the lobby, you're on the Riverwalk, and there's just shops and restaurants for what, a mile, 2 miles? How long's the Riverwalk?
It's awesome. There's 4 or 5 hotels now. We always partner with those hotels to get discounted rates, but the Riverwalk and the food and the nightlife, San Antonio is just awesome place to visit.
What's the hotel you partner with? What do you recommend? Which one?
A great one is Hotel Valencia. We got St. Anthony Hotel. We got the Grand Hyatt. There's La Mansion. They're all awesome.
So let's talk about the negatives of San Antonio. Are you sad that Mark Cuban, our idol, went and bought the Dallas Mavericks instead of the San Antonio Spurs?
Man, there is no better organization than the Spurs, so all the whiny kids can whine about that as much as they want. We just don't give a shit. So there's nothing better than Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs. I'm happy for Cuban of having a great investment, and if he needs to whine to try to get people into his message, fine, but we just don't care.
Are you a fan of his Shark Tank?
It's funny. I think it's odd that all they talk about are little gimmicky products instead of big ideas and big businesses. So I think it's entertaining, but I don't feel like it's something to learn from.
You're right. Do you think there should be a Shark Tank for people that are pitching to VCs? I mean, all these kids in Silicon Valley, pitching, wanting millions of dollars instead of coming here on Shark Tank wanting to sell 10% of my company for $200,000. You think there should be a Shark Tank for I want to sell 10% of my company for $10 million and the big.
That's right. Well, you've got all these venture accelerator programs across the country. I'm actually part of the Telluride Venture Accelerator program in Colorado. But why haven't they just crowdsourced venture accelerating and made it an entertaining thing and have it to where you can learn about these million or multi-million or even billion-dollar opportunities? That'd be so educational. I wish that existed. But all that exists is combination of slight reality TV with low, smaller deals that are a lot of times gimmicky, and at the end of the day, you never really learn and understand anything from it. You just laugh at someone that's got a funny product about who knows what, the step stool for a freaking toilet. I mean, that's all. So Shark Tank, it's entertaining. I'll flip through that just like I would American Idol. I don't really learn anything from it, though.
Well, the funny thing with me, people always say, how do you have time? I mean, I have 20,000 posts here. How do you have time for this stuff? Well, I look at them. The average American watches TV 4 hours a day. I don't. The only thing I turn on the TV is because to see the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, that's my weak spot. I still love the NFL, but if it's not the NFL, I don't watch TV.
You know what? Here's the problem. Success in life and happiness and health, I think, has a lot to do with the habits we have. Oh. A habit we do every single day. My God, we better get that one right. This once-a-year thing we might do, it doesn't matter. But if our habit is to go watch 2 or 3 hours of TV every day instead of just going to bed a half an hour early, waking up a half an hour early and running a 5K every morning or getting on the bike or doing a swim or whatever, we're just asking ourselves to be fat and unhealthy. We need habits. Work out a little bit. Don't go out to eat every day. Have a date night with our wife once a week. I mean, those little habits make all the difference. If our habit is to watch TV for 3 or 4 hours a day, and then we bitch about being unhealthy and unhappy marriage, and we don't have enough money or patience in our practice, yet we're unwilling to actually spend a half an hour working on it, and I just don't think we have a lot of leg to stand on there. I think that's a big problem we got in our society right now.
Well, hey, you're a legend. You're a role model. You're an idol. I commit. I want to go to your next one. Email me, howard@dentaltown.com. Those dates, or I'll go to Breakaway practice. And if you're one of our podcast viewers, always feel free. You can always contact me, howard@dentaltown.com, or go to dentaltown.com and see what the other 202,000 dentists are talking about from 206 countries. And I'll tell you what, the reason we have 202,000 registered dentists from 206 countries is because 95% of the people just go there and lurk and read. But it's guys like you, Scott, that have posted 2,000 times since 2005. It's the killer content from real guys in the trenches really doing it. It's guys like you who made Dentaltown, not me. I literally had 0.00 to do with that community. It's not called Howardtown. It was called Dentaltown. And Scott, thank you so much, because it was guys like you who made Dentaltown what it is for today.
Yeah, Howard, thank you so much for having me. And of course, you have changed dentistry with Dentaltown and the big idea and the big picture. And I'm just so happy with how everything's gone with Dentaltown and for dentistry. All of us dentists would be completely different without Dentaltown. I know you hear it all the time, but I can't help it. I got to say it too. It's just amazing. Thank you for what you've done for dentistry.
Well, we should start the Mutual Admiration Club, and we'll be the only 2 members. All right, buddy. Rock and roll, and good luck with everything you do. And I will see you in San Antonio.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right, buddy.